for my first question, I want to ask, do you identify as Habesha?
It's quite an interesting question. So I identify as Habesha partially only. And I start to hear more about this term Habesha when I first came to US. Back home we say Habesha, but there's just so among each other, so we don't identify yourself as Habesha or non-Habesha. You are just in the community, are a part of it. So when I first came to US, then people start to say, are you Habesha? No, initially the first person who asked me was from Oromo, Ethiopia, and then he said, do you identify yourself as Habesha? Initially I said yes. And then another person who was Israeli Jew who moved to Israel, what they call Falasha, and then he asked me same, do you identify yourself as Habesha? And then I start to kind of question the word itself. And then I start to become more political conscious. And then sometimes I would say, I kind of use it very diplomatically, I would say. Since I moved to DC, it's very common here, so I don't speak Amharic. So whenever let's say I call Uber, then some Habesha name comes, and then the conversation starts, oh, Habesha. And then I would respond in English and then say, are you into Habesha? I say, yes, I am, but I don't speak Amharic. And then it starts and then it doesn't go usually well. So, or I would from the beginning I would just make sure that I'm Eritrean, so I would start speaking in Tigrinya to say that okay, let's kind of keep our terms. Let's say if they say are you Habesha, and immediately I would say yes, I'm Habesha, I'm from Eritrea, because the way some people use it might be exclusive. It's not inclusive to say. And the more I start to understand about others, let's say other parts of Ethiopia, mainly Oromo, other ethnic groups. Mm-hmm. Same with other ethnic groups apart from Tigrinya, say Kunama, Tigray, other ethnic groups. They don't identify themselves as Habesha. So by saying that, you're kind of excluding them from the domain. So I start to become more sensitive. So I would say, and at work there are also people from Ethiopia. There are people from Oromo. Some of my good friends are from Oromo. Now at work, so, and they don't use the word Habesha for them. It really irritates them too, even when they are called Habesha. So I start to become more politically sensitive, and as much as possible, I try to avoid it. That's how I guess.
And would you say, because I know you said you moved from Ohio, would you say that you started encountering the word more in the DC area, or is this how has, I guess, your relationship to the word changed?
In Ohio, I was living in a very small community, and there were very few people. So we want to start identifying as Habesha. We just kind of just say with our names. It's more with DC, and this kind of often seen as Habesha land or kind of most populated Habesha place. I think it's more with intensity of the war that I just become more reluctant to even use it. And with the recent war, with division in Ethiopia, by saying that I start to understand I'm excluding other parts. So, or by saying that word, I'm kind of, it felt like I'm taking stand. Mm-hmm. Especially recently with the war in Tigray. Many Tigrayans do not want to be identified as Ethiopians now, recently. So if you ask them, are you Ethiopian? They say, no, I'm Tigrayan. And they start also to be reluctant about the word Habesha, even themselves. And during the conflict, I'm sure other parts of Ethiopia, the Oromo, the other ethnic groups were very reluctant to use the word Habesha among themselves. So I started to be very conscious of the term use, and added to that the language issues myself, like the Amharic. I don't speak Amharic. Let's say I would say, I don't speak Amharic, and then they would ask me, what happened? I say, I didn't learn Amharic. Mm-hmm. I didn't grow up learning Amharic. Oh, but many times speak Amharic. It just the conversation starts to be ugly. So I start to say, okay, I'm Eritrean, or lately. It just becomes if the Uber driver is an Ethiopian, it just becomes tense. I would not even open my I would not even open conversation. I would just open the door, say hi, good morning. That's all. As a way of protecting shielding myself. I'm not sure how it is.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I feel like people always ask me, why'd you leave DC? It's such a great city. And I'm like, I love home, but yeah, it's just every day you have to fight someone just for being Eritrean, it feels like sometimes. Right, I think it's funny, specifically with Amharic, which, like you said, it's not just Eritreans, it's also other ethnic groups. But yeah, if you go into a coffee shop, or if you go, it is the Ubers, the Ethiopians run Uber. But I'd love to hear just more about kind of what your network has said about being Habesha. It sounds like with Tigray, it's more about disassociating from Ethiopia rather than the culture, versus with like Oromo, Kunama, etc. It's more about the culture. So I was wondering if you could speak more about that.
With I have close kind of family friends who are Kunama, Eritreans. I know them since back home. We often tend to forget other parts if you are among the hegemony, like if you are in the power. We tend to forget about other minorities. Let's say I might be diverting, but there are like, say, tilfi, the dress, like the woman's dress. It usually carries like the symbol of mescal, the cross. This person who's Kunama but also a Muslim, she was saying, like, casually, I said, like, how do you do? She wants to dress. And I say, but she said, but I can't. You know what? They are all mescals, and they just take it for granted. They have to put mescal. So slowly, I start to kind of dissociate with the term, or I would just use it very rarely or very shortly, just to say like hi, and then just also move to other things. And as it moves, the word kind of changed meaning. Let's say in Sudan, they say Habesh. If they say Habesh, it's kind of very derogatory word for them. Here, among us, I think we kind of use it for some sense of superiority, right? But in Sudan, to be called Habesh is just say a kind of it's just to say like the lowest of the low. It's just Habesh. Habesh by itself is just an insult. So all the way to in Arabic words. So for them, it's a way of saying somebody who's not one of us. I think it just becomes more common when you leave the country. Back home, you don't hear it much. Of course, you hear, but you won't. It doesn't come quite often the way we use it here. Kind of advances with others. If you are part of the group, you don't identify yourself as such. So it's when others refer to you that it just becomes a name, right? In order to be named, somebody has to refer to you as saying this. Mm-hmm. So, and that way you can understand it came from other culture or other language. The original word is Habesh, also not Habesha, but Habesh. Mm-hmm. That's how they say in Arabic. And if you are part of it, you don't use it, of course, to refer yourself. Mm-hmm. Unless you are referring yourself against someone else, against an outsider. But somehow it's kind of also, it just becomes synonymous with Coptic Orthodox sometimes. The kind of, let's say, Odamat Habesha, when you say like Habesha, Odamat Habesha, something like Habesha holidays, so it's something to refer to, like to Optic traditions. I left Eritrea in January 2012. Never been back there since. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I'm politically very upfront, and I don't feel safe to go back home, so I prefer to stay. Then I was working in the college. I was writing. I was a writer, journalist, and working in the college. Yeah. So I came here initially to study in Ohio University. I did my master's and PhD in Ohio, and then I moved to DC.
How old were you when you left?
28. Around the things.
And then from our conversation, I gather that your ethnicity is Tigrinya and you come from a Christian family.
My parents are, my parents are Christian, yeah. But I don't know. I was Christian, yeah.
Okay.
My mom has been to Jerusalem recently. It's good for her. But I'm atheist. Luckily, I used to live in Barantu, which is lowland of Eritrea. I grew up like interacting with Kunama, Tigray, Nara, other ethnic groups. So I also speak, although I've been forgetting that I fairly speak, then I spoke good Kunama, Arabic, fairly good Tigray. So I pretty much I was exposed to other cultures and other religion, pretty much exposed to other religion. Yeah.
Would you say the community was diverse in the city?
It was very diverse, and you see this problem when it just become very isolated when you come to Asmara. Like people, like let's say later we moved to Asmara, but you see the difference between growing up in Asmara or other parts of Eritrea.
What would you say, is Habesha representation in popular media? What does Habesha look like?
I think it's the infusion of the popular culture was from Eritrea and Ethiopia, because if you control the media, if you control the music, if you control if you have the resources, then you just kind of bombard things. And this is capitalism. So let's say if you produce Samsung in Kunama or Tigray or Afar, you can't sustain on YouTube naturally. The song might have 1,000 or 2,000 hits, and it can't sustain it. So it's that way. That's the hegemony of the popular naturally just kind of will be heard more. If somebody opens a Kunama restaurant in DC, they can't sustain. That's why you have to go for the popular thing. So it's part of the capitalism, part of the market. I think I would say much of the ideology of what we call Habesha would have been infused through the church. We are not black, we are not white, we are kind of from Israelis. That kind of has the biblical root, I guess. this has been hammered for long, for generations. Say we are different, we are different. We say we are the first Christian in Africa, things like this. So this has simmered in their minds, in their thinking, and then to an extent where they start to down look at others, say we are different, we are not like them, we are not like Africans, we are not Africans. And unfortunately or unfortunately, the politicians have used this to manipulate it, like especially during Haile Selassie regime, like push for that kind of thinking, that kind of ideology. So I think that also kind of got duplicated into what we see now.
That is a great segue into the conversation with Africans. I appreciate you talking about just like the origins of where our superiority complex comes from, because we've really seen this play out in a number of ways with other African nations. You also mentioned, the phrases, I'm not Black, I'm not African. And so I'd love to hear more, just because you have this unique experience from a lot of people that I've interviewed so far of, being born and raised in the country and staying quite late into your late 20s. So thinking about how was your identity as an African being formed while you were in Eritrea? And then since you've left, how has your identity evolved?
I think it's a combination of two things. One is this cultural insulation of what we call Habesha, like the Orthodox thing that we say we are different, we are special, we are something. And then added to that is the lack of exposure from the politically, because Eritreans cannot leave the country, they don't have exposure to other cultures and cities, other parts of Africa. And unfortunately, the Eritrean media only kind of portrays coups, hunger, something like that. So most people have internalized that kind of feeling about other parts of Africa. The national media would only kind of pick that kind of news from Africa. Not necessarily the international Eritrean media, but that's, I think, even the international media. But unless there is an accident in Ghana, it can come to Eritrean media attention. Let's say if there is local election in Ghana, it's just nothing. We are kind of confined in that secluded space where we only see them through their negative perspective. So that played very negative role in kind of thinking about others, like how we see them, how we see other African countries. I only left one time before I left the country. I've been to China in 2008.
Why did you go to China?
I went for a conference. It was about culture, writing culture. Not many people are exposed to that kind of. They don't have much that kind of exposure, so they will only see we are different. That kind of mentality. They say we are much better than others because they are failing. They are not doing politically correct. That kind of thing. Here, even like in years, we would still think that we are special. We are different. We are unique. That kind of a mentality. That's also the insulated community. Let's say they come. I even see that especially among Ethiopians here. I've seen many Africans say, you just seem, you're just full of yourself. That's what they say.
Well, it's funny because I don't know if you've seen this interview. If you haven't, I can send it after. But there are this series of interviews in black and white on national American television. And it's of these very young Africans, 14, 15, 16. And this white woman is just asking them, how was your time in America? Because it's also the 50s. They're trying to make it seem like it's not racist. They're like, how have you guys been enjoying, your schools? That came up because the Ethiopian, 14-year-old who actually ended up being a military officer in Abiy's government. He became very powerful later on in life. He was like, I'm not black. I am a Hebrew Israelite. He was saying that.
But when I first came to an African-American court of mine, she was telling me about racism, American racism, and then she said, you don't understand it, you don't face it yourself. So they are treated differently. With lighter skin, slightly, Habesha, she also knows that. They are treated differently. People would also see it as, as kind of, in between, somewhere in between. So they would also, they would love that kind of thing. So naturally, you'd be privileged, I guess. Besides, in terms of, let's say, shades of color, of course, yeah, but it's not necessarily, especially this is not necessarily a sign of negative sign. For you, they might say, Kadrait or Salam, for you.
Oh, wow. How many shades?
For myself, they might say, or slightly lighter skin. The color, so there's shades of black, right? Shades of black, shades of lighter, so.
As you've just kind of been navigating life, transitioning to DC, how would you say that, your relationships with other Africans are?
Back there, since I was living in student college, in College Town, for many parts of Africa, we always have parties. But when I came to DC, we have our co-workers in our office still from many parts of Africa. But I think that kind of saturates after some time. You might go for happy hour with some of them, but it just becomes, you don't have fresh interaction or fresh kind of vibe here. After something, this becomes routine.
Sounds like the size of the towns, like because of back home or back in Ohio, it's smaller, like it was easier to connect versus in DC. Maybe people have other events.
No, it was university town, so there are always newcomers, new students, there is always parties, invitations, graduation. There are many events. And at some point, you don't have even the energy to interact and then hang out with some people, some random people.
And would you say like the way you've settled into your routine is like primarily with Eritreans, or do you have a diverse friend group and network?
Here, I do have other from other countries, close friends. One from Liberia, one from Cameroon. At work, Eritreans, Ethiopians, some from other countries, Africa. I made the decision to live away from the Eritrean Ethiopian community side, so I get to hang out with others.
How do you see like Eritrea's movement for human rights in conjunction or in relation to the other movements throughout the continent?
One thing that we often forget is we're very, very small and very irrelevant to an extent in the bigger picture. We don't occupy big space. We don't occupy Eritrea is a very irrelevant country, very small country. There's a tendency that where we kind of, we exaggerate about ourselves. We say, basically we don't count. That's how I see it. I say, the more I say, okay, it's just kind of small county, that kind of level.
Really?
Yeah. So, and lately, especially, I say, okay, let me just do it. Let me be a little more selfish. That's how I'm just thinking. I would care. I would like to interact or kind of deal with or be part of the conversation either regionally, globally, or in terms of anyway. So, but the more I realize Eritrean capacity, yes, okay, I'm more kind of now withdrawing, not giving up, but kind of coming to sense with myself, I guess. The first thing should be like to know other people instead of having this bad or instead of having this notion of like saying they're different, they're far. So you should start with that kind of conversation, like say, try to read their stories, try to translate or work on their stories, expose them with your audience first, so that to be receptive also. That's how I see things now.
I love that. When did you move from like only like Horn of Africa news to like other African news?
I think when I became editor here, I quickly realized that this is just bullshit. I mean,
what do you mean?
I know when I sat here and then I start to see and then I say, okay, I start to realize I say, okay, I'm also part of this very incestuous kind of community. So I say, okay, let me just kind of expand at this. I think I have written this in many ways, but for long, I was kind of feeling somewhere in between. I was not feeling Eritrean. I wanted never to go to Eritrea. Of course, I don't feel like going to Eritrea. And I was not considering myself as part of US, as part of America too. I always felt like there's a different space for me, a different place, another home for me somewhere.
Outside of both countries.
Yeah. In fact, I wrote somewhere, I say, why I don't want to stay, I never want to return, neither to return nor not to stay. I spent much of my time like in the university. First I did my master's, then a PhD, and then I was working at the university just online, and then I moved, I just became editor. So I kind of, my position is very privileged, I guess. So it doesn't represent the others, like the way others came to. So I'm speaking from a very privileged position, that I also understand it. One of the main things that I want to have my American passport is for travel. I think I've traveled 7 or 8 times with travel document. That was this hectic. So I said, let me just have the American citizenship and then just have the passport. So I know my position is very privileged position, so it might not represent other views, I guess.
When you left Eritrea, it sounds like you left because of education. How were you able to get permission to do that? I would love to hear what that journey is like.
It was not easy to leave the country. Even I was not initially permitted to. I went even to the office of the president of the country. So finally, they allowed me to go to South Africa. So I came to South Africa. The privilege from Eritrean perspective, because they don't send somebody to even like South Africa. So
what year did you go to South Africa?
2012. I stayed there briefly for about 6 months, and then I came here.
Directly from South Africa?
Yeah.
Why South Africa?
So I got scholarship in Ohio University, and they denied me to come to US. I had my American visa, so I had to defer my coming. And then they said, I went to the office of the president in person, and then discussed with now the Minister of Information, Yamane, who blocked me on Twitter. He said, we cannot send you to America, but if you find any other scholarship to other countries, we'll send you. So I got some scholarship to South Africa, and they let me go.
So then what was the process like getting into university?
It's very tough to get to the university in Eritrea. 10,000 since do matriculation exam, we have called national exam, then maybe about 20% would only come to university, would pass the university.
Okay.
Less than 20%.
Well, I mean, I know you mentioned your time in South Africa was brief, but I've read a couple of articles about how, you know, I guess like the racial system in the United States, we kind of get sucked into just being black. Like anyone who's black is black. Versus in South Africa, you know, they have these very stringent racial categories. And yeah, now you have these Habesha people coming saying, we're not white, we're not black, like, we're not colored. What is all this? I'm wondering, like, how you experienced it.
There's a parallelism between the South African colored and the Habesha in terms of many things. Kind of privileged in between space, neither white nor black, that kind of thing. So
when you were in South Africa, you were perceived as colored.
Yeah, I did, yeah, I was. They assume that I'm colored. And I'm not so experienced.
Like, obviously, I feel like you share it a lot, but it seems like the word has more of an impact in the diaspora, kind of as you said. Like, from what I'm gathering thus far with Eritreans who've been back in Eritrea within the last 10 years or so, they don't really use it. Unless it's like, yeah. With that, I invite you to share any last thoughts you may have on the word before we conclude the interview.
I think I've said what I could say, I guess.